All right, everybody, what is going on? Captain Cody Davis back again for another video here. This is going to be the first video of many, I guess you could say, to come here on the channel. Kind of a new short series that I'm going to start posting on the channel here probably once a week. And what this is going to be is, well, we'll kind of back up. Any of you that have been following my channel for any extended amount of time know that I keep it pretty simple when it comes to guiding / tournament fishing out here on Lake Okeechobee as to what baits I carry in the boat with me at all times and what I throw. But with that being said, I get a lot of questions from you guys asking what hardware I switch out, what particular brand of that particular lure I throw, what rod, what reel, what action, what line, what gear ratios I throw them on. A lot of those small questions. So I thought it would just be a good idea to pick out a particular technique / bait once a week and just go over all that. I'll go over what I throw it on, why I choose to throw it on that, and what brand and things, just really break it down for you guys. Now, keep in mind, the cool thing about bass fishing is there's no right or wrong way to do anything. This is what works for me. That might mean that it's going to be completely opposite as to what works for you or what gives you confidence in what you fish with to the best of your ability. If what you're throwing or using is working for you, don't change it. Fishing's all about confidence. This is all, this is just, like I said, this is what works for me, and I'm going to explain why I think it's the best thing for me. Now, also on top of that, keep in mind that what I'm using is tailored to fishing out here on Lake Okeechobee / down here in South Florida. Fishing around thick grass, heavy vegetation, bigger fish. Okay, so you might need to adjust this slightly if you're watching from out of state or from another region or what have you. So also you might just be a fishing nerd who's just always looking to learn. That's kind of like me. I'm very fixed in my ways, but even if I'm extremely happy with my setup for a particular technique and I see a video of someone else talking about what they use, I watch it, because sometimes you might be able to tweak a little tiny thing or pick up on something that somebody said in a video that helps your presentation or what have you. So like I said, I'm not telling you this is the right way or the only way to do it, but I'm just going to go over kind of, like I said, what I use and why I use it. So it's going to be a different technique / bait or presentation every week. But for the first video, we're going to start out with arguably probably my most valuable setup that won me the most money out here on Lake Okeechobee in the year 2022. It's something that I'm fairly new to dissecting and dialing in, I'll say, but it's caught a ton of big fish for me this year on guide trips and fishing for a lot of money and competition. And it's become something that I have a lot of confidence in, and just a presentation that, I don't know. Like I said, I just have a lot of confidence in it, and it's proven. I mean, I've caught a lot of big fish on this technique, and it's a staple down here. It's a staple all over the country. Everyone knows what it is, but particularly down here in South Florida, down in the Everglades, and on Lake Okeechobee, Lake Kissimmee, it's just a bait that it's old school, and I don't think it's going anywhere soon because it catches a lot of big ones. And we're going to be talking about a super spook / just a big walking bait, a Zara spook. Now, here's the deal. I am not a topwater guy at all. I don't label myself as that. I'm not the guy that says, oh, I love nothing more than a big topwater blow up. I'd rather feel the bump on a worm or the tick on flipping a jig over watching a 9-pounder eat a spook any day of the week. I throw this not because I like to see the blow up. I throw it because it works and it catches big ones, and there's no denying that. Now, keep this in mind. This combo and this setup that I'm using and I'm going to talk about today is tailored to throwing a big walking style bait. There are other staples down here as far as topwater goes, like a big pop R, or even like a prop bait, like a devil's horse. I'll probably do a video on that somewhere down the line, what I throw that on. That's a very niche thing for me. When I break out that devil's horse, it's usually around the spawn, and like I said, we'll get into that another time. That's not necessarily the same setup and tackle that I throw a prop bait on. I don't throw that bait on this same setup, and I'll explain to you why in that video. But we're just going to be talking about a big walking style bait here, okay? And we'll just kind of get right into it, and we'll just start with the bait. When I say a big walking style bait, 9 times out of 10, I'm talking about a Heddon Super Spook, like I have right here. Now, there's a ton of different walking baits on the market, and all of them work, okay? And some of the big ones are like the Reaction Innovation Vixen that are hard to find. Everyone raves over them. The Yozuri makes a new big hydro pencil, or I don't know if that's a particular name, is the hydro pencil. I think the hydro pencil is the saltwater version, but they make a big pencil style bait. I don't even, 6 Sense makes them. Strike King makes, I don't know if you guys can see it, this big mega dog. Everyone makes a big walking style bait now. Here's the deal. For me, the Yozuri walking bait is my second pick. It's fantastic. It's great. It's got that big 1-knock system in it. It comes with great hardware. But here's the deal, guys. The Heddon Super Spook, this is the deal for me right here. And in particular, this is actually the saltwater version. Now, the main reason I throw the saltwater version is because of this particular color. I don't even know if I'm legally allowed to say this, being a registered captain, but I passed my test with fine colors. I am slightly colorblind. At least I think I am. Like, I know this is gold, but I guess that's like a mustard color, right? I don't even know exactly what to call that color down there. But I guess it's a mustard. They only make this in the saltwater spook. Now, I throw this same bait in like a chrome. I throw it in a baby bass, but this particular color down here on Lake Okeechobee, I've talked about it from time and time again. I think it's just a confidence thing, but this is my favorite. The main reason I bought it is because of the gold sides. What is it Lake Okeechobee known for? Are big golden shiners. So that's what got me started throwing a big spook, was I wanted something that I could imitate those big shiners. I was finding tons of big shiner fish that you could go and throw big shiners and catch these big bass. And I wanted to try and be able to go back to them throwing artificial in an event and be able to catch those same fish. Needless to say, it didn't quite work that well, but that's what got me started on this color and this particular bait. And they were like on sale somewhere, so I bought like 10 of them. And it's just, they work great. I just catch a ton of big fish on them. So right off the rip, what you'll probably notice is I only have 2 hooks on here. It has 3, and I've done a video about this in the past, but we'll go over it again. I take that middle hook off, and I upsize the front and back hook by like 2 sizes. These are EWG style trebles. Owner makes good ones. Gamakatsu makes good ones. Mustad makes good ones. I believe these are Gamakatsus, and I think these are number 1s or number 2s. One or the other. They're very big. Okay, now you might ask why. I'll kind of break this down real quick. The reason I don't put the middle one on there is A, because a lot of times your trebles will tend to foul, and I hate dealing with that. But the main reason is, okay, so you have round bend style trebles and you have EWG style trebles, and it's no secret, a lot of the pros agree, and you watch their videos. If a fish is coming up and trying to kill a bait and swat it, round bend trebles will hook that fish twice as much. It'll snag them, like, in the face or what have you. But if your fish are actively eating a bait, in my opinion, EWG style trebles hook and get a better bite into that fish. Okay, and that's what I'm trying to do here. So if you're running 3 treble hooks, a lot of times you might hook more fish, but that doesn't mean you're going to land more fish. All right, when these fish come up and smack that bait, sometimes they're trying to kill it at first, and if you snag them slightly in the cheek, in the tail, in the side, in the top of the head, a lot of times you might have them on for a second, but they might just pull off. Now put yourself on Lake Okeechobee, where they dive down into buggy whips, reeds, pads, hydrilla, if you're lucky enough to find any, eelgrass, a mat. That's even more of an opportunity for that fish to pull off. So when I'm throwing this bait, I really want that fish to come up and try to eat it. And in my opinion, with that middle hook missing, if they come up and hit it, that's less of a chance that they're going to get smacked or feel the hooks there. And then you can kind of let the bait hang out and just aggressively work it a couple more times, and then they might come up and actively eat it. When they get these hooks, all right, they very rarely ever have both in their mouth. It's usually going to be they're going to grab by the tail or the head, all right? So instead of dealing with some smaller little treble hooks where you got to baby the fish, these trebles got a fairly good bite to them. All right, there's a pretty good gap there. They're pretty thick gauge wire. So what does that mean? That means, you know, you don't have to do the typical baby them and be light with them when you're fishing a small wire, small treble hook. You can kind of put some heat on these fish, which we often need to do when throwing a spook out here on Okeechobee. Again, we're fishing around thick cover. So let's just say, you know, I hook an 8-pounder on this hook, all right? That fish comes up and gets it. I reel down and just kind of give a good pull. Now, once the fish is hooked, and we'll get into the rod and reel here in a minute, I can put a good amount of pressure on that fish because that fish hopefully has that big treble hook in its mouth. The other good thing is, instead of having possibly two treble hooks to snag obstructions in the water, other reeds, grass, what have you, to work as a de-hooker, now you only got one to worry about, which is great. So it just kind of, you know, it just, to me, when I hook them on this bait, I very rarely lose them. And like I said, this is just what works for me when switching those hooks out. Now you might notice, wow, he has a swivel on there. I did that just to try to play with it to see if it could keep that line further out in front of the bait so your braid doesn't foul like this. To be honest with you, I did it to 2 or 3 of them and I'm never going to do it again. I mean, it doesn't hurt, but it doesn't work any better, so it's kind of pointless. But that, you know, any color spook, whatever you have confidence in, but I really like the Heddon Super Spook. Just like the way it walks great, walks very aggressively. You can work it very hard and work it very aggressively without the bait moving forward, with it staying in the strike zone, which I really like. I like the profile, and it throws like a missile. Like I said, if I had to pick a second one, it's the Yozuri, their big pencil style bait. All right, so off of that, you notice I have braid straight to where I tie it on. And I'll usually run 3 or 4 bobber stops on there. Again, that's just to float the braid away from the trebs so that they don't foul. But this is 50-pound braid. You can use 30, you can use 40, all right? You could use whatever. I don't like 65 because the difference between 50 and 65-pound braid is pretty, what's the word I'm looking for? It's a lot bigger. So it catches more wind, the bait doesn't walk as freely. 40-pound braid or 30 is probably even more ideal. But I just go with 50 and it works for me. And I throw it straight to it. I don't use a little piece of mono. I used to for some stretch, but now the rod I use kind of gives me some give. So we'll go right to that. So I got 50-pound braid. This is what works for me. This is an arc invoker. Every rod manufacturer in the United States or in the world makes a 7 to a 7.2 medium action rod. This rod in particular, the reason I throw it in a medium, it kind of acts like a medium heavy. All right, it's got a little bit of ball to it, but it's got a really big, like a good bend to it. So what does that do? That does a couple of things. One, throwing it on a medium action rod, when you go to throw, the whole rod will load. You could throw this thing legitimately 70 yards if you wanted to, which is nice if we're fishing around areas that have big gizzard shad, and the fish will often come up and chase bait, like that Roland Martin series me and Kelly got 4th in. We had 28.5 pounds. 3 of our fish came on this bait, and some of them would come up chasing shad, and you could fire that thing a mile with that rod. It all loads up and it goes. The other cool thing is that acts as my drag. So again, going back to the bigger style hooks, you don't have to fish the baby light drag, worrying about pulling those hooks out. The drag's relatively tight for topwater and a treble hook bait. That fish eats it, I load it, and I just keep that rod bending, and that, you know, that 4 or 3 feet of parabolic bend of give that softer rod has, that's my drag. Okay, and then, I mean, if it bends that out and keeps going, well, my drag's, it can pull drag, but it's probably tighter than most people would throw it. And the reason I do that is I want that rod to bend. I want there to be some give when fighting the fish. But what's everyone tell you when you're fighting a big fish on top water, right? Keep the rod down, keep their head down, don't let them jump. Oftentimes when we're throwing these big spooks out here on Okeechobee, you fight them the opposite. At least I do. I keep the rod tip almost up, all right? Because a lot of times we're around submerged grass, reeds, obstructions in the water that fish is going to try and get you down in. Again, bigger grip, bigger bite treble hooks. It's almost like fighting them on a worm hook at that point. I'm very confident I have that fish pinned in good shape. And I'll almost keep the rod tip up, trying to keep them up out of that stuff. Now, if I'm around a sandy bottom, then yes, obviously there's nothing for them to get you in. But when it comes to where we typically throw it, you got to kind of manhandle the fish a little bit. So I'm able to fight the fish on tighter drag, and that rod just keeps that hook pinned for me. And I keep that line really tight. Another reason why I want to keep that line tight is I want it tight enough where if they swim through a pad or a buggy whip or something, that braid acts like a razor. It will actually cut the grass down. If you're fighting them on a baby drag and really light, that braid's not going to have that cutting action with the grass, and you're going to lose more fish. So at least that's the way I look at it. So that's the rod I throw it on. This is a 7.2. A lot of people like throwing their top waters on a 6.6 or a 6.9, a 6.10, a 7 foot. This 7.2 works for me. I just really like the bend of this rod, and I'm a fan of longer rods. I grew up fishing on the fishing pier, saltwater fishing. So I'm very accustomed to fishing 7.5, up to 12-foot rods. So that 7.2 rod feels actually really short to me. And again, that just gives me some more bend and gives me some more give to fight that fish. This is a very low profile Abu Garcia reel. This is an 8-to-1. This is one of the only applications that I use a very high speed reel. Again, I don't really have to winch on these fish with a treble hook, so I don't really need a lot of torque, and I want that line pickup just for when I twitch it, it's picking that line up, making that line go a little tighter, which is, at the end of the day, I can work the bait a lot quicker if need be. But what it really does is it keeps that line just tight enough to where it doesn't slack and the line doesn't go limp and hook that front treble hook, and you don't foul as much. That's my biggest thing. Also, when the fish hits it, sometimes they hit it coming at you. And this isn't a bait they're going to necessarily hold on to, like a worm or a soft plastic, like a Big Easy or something. They feel that it's hard. They get in their mouth and they're hooked. So I want to be able to pick up line. I don't want to have to really crank aggressively. I want to almost keep the bait like after the fish bites, almost keep it like I'm still working the plug until it gets tight, and then just pull into them. And that fast gear ratio allows me to do that. Low profile being, this is some high-end Abu Garcia reel. This thing costs way too much money, but it's a very small, low-profile reel, and why that's important to me is fatigue. I want something that palms very easily, all right, and doesn't wear out my hand. I don't want to feel like I'm holding a shoe in my hand when you're doing this all day long. I want something small so it's easy for me to work the bait. Sometimes they want that really slow glide cadence. But most of the time, I'm working that bait really, really aggressively, like snatching it on a really slack line. So it's throwing water and darting left, right. But like I said, it's not moving forward. It's more or less staying in the strike zone. So having a small, low profile reel enables me to do that easier and for a more, longer amount of time. Throwing that bait around spawning fish, around pressured fish, where sometimes I'm throwing this bait where most people wouldn't throw a treble hook topwater, in pockets of the eelgrass and pockets of hydrilla, dollar pads, right up alongside a reed, laying it up there, letting it sit, and just, really making that fish almost pissed off at it. And, this setup allows me to do that very well. So 50-pound braid, Heddon Super Spook. I only use 2 trebs, I upsize them. And 7.2 medium heavy rod. But you want something that just has a good bend. It just, like I said, that's super light. This is something if you really want to get into throwing a big topwater, you might want to spend some money on some higher end rod or reel. Just again, going back to fatigue. You want it lightweight so that it just doesn't wear you out when you're throwing a topwater for a long day of fishing. So that's it. That's my top water breakdown. I don't know, or my big spook breakdown. I don't, last but not least, I don't throw a feather on the hook. A lot of people will ask me, do you throw a feather on the back of your hook? I just don't, because I'm too lazy to wrap one on there, and I really like those hooks that I'm using, and they don't come with a feather. But a feather probably wouldn't hurt at all if someone wants to wrap feathered treble hooks for me, but that gets bit just as well as I think it needs to. So that's my spook setup. I don't know what the next one will be, but like I said, I'm going to try and go over these once a week just to put some content out there for you guys. So yeah, that's about it. Let me know what you think. Leave any comments or likes or questions you guys have below. And I appreciate you guys watching, and we'll see you on the next video.